I have to write about it. But he said, I know. Oh, yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely. Even this part is very
No, we will be very careful. Feels like you never left, huh?
I wake up on Tuesday morning and I feel like I'm already here.
Yeah, I know.
The only thing that switches is suddenly they're replaced by angel Tennessee counseling.
Yes, yes.
Wednesday morning, it feels like I'm going to my bedroom.
Miss Plotnick. Good, how are you?
I would like to call our session back to order, please. Okay, I hope that everybody was able to get a little nourishment. So good to take a little bit of a break. Okay, the public portion of this issue is still open. Anyone wishing to make a comment with new and fresh material, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman,
You're taking another bite at the apple?
well, no, I'm not. I was, for some reason, tuned down and handed me, as I was going out the door, a statement she couldn't stay. So she asked me to put her sticker on a sign sheet and read something I haven't even read yet. If that's out of order, I won't read it.
This is from June down, you think?
Yeah, she handed this to me as I was walking out the door to lunch.
I saw June in the audience, so I'll permit that.
Okay, so I did the best I can, small writing for me. I would like to take this opportunity to comment on Mr. Harrington's letter, the Planning Commission's recommendation, and the staff report. All three of these items have failed to include / recognize the one thing that is in front of the board today. That is the opportunity that this matter represents. Favoring a broad interpretation of the zoning code will send the message to the public, to landowners, to entrepreneurs, to banks, that Calaveras County is a county that says yes, yes to innovation, yes to business, yes to let's figure out how to make it work rather than no, it can't be done. Today's economy is the worst that this generation has ever faced. The county and the state on a brink of, I'm just reading it word for word, on a brink of economic collapse, and it is just unconscionable to think that this young family has been fighting to invest in this community for over 5 years. They support community organizations, employ local people, and support other local family-owned businesses. Any other county would have found a way to make this work. Today is an opportunity for this board to turn the whole issue around, make Calaveras County a yes, county of yes, and make this happen to save this family's agritourism business, attract business investment and visitors to our area, and boost our local economy. I urge the board to vote yes on alternative A as proposed in the staff report for the benefit of the entire community. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. June down.
Thank you for reading that.
Would like this or whatever.
Good afternoon.
Hi. My name is Charles Corbin. I live at 7816 Paso Drive, which is just a little south of so I'm in the neighborhood. We've been there for 12 years. We moved there when my wife retired. I'm still working in the Bay Area, so I'm one of those mega commuters. And I hear the people starting out at about 3 in the morning headed down that way. The character of the neighborhood is there's a lot of us are people that moved in from the city. I'd say that probably over half of my neighbors came from the Bay Area. There's some from Stockton and local communities. My wife and I are originally from Stockton, born and raised there. In the late 60s, Uncle Sam said he needed some of my time, so we left Stockton and then ended up in the semiconductor industry down in the Bay Area. So we always wanted to come back home because this is the general area that we grew up in. And I used to hunt and fish in this area in Calaveras County years ago. The neighborhood is a lot of retirees, a lot of mega commuters, and a few young families, not a large number. Most of the parcels, I would say, would probably be like 5 acres. There's some 10s, maybe some 20s. But to call us ranches or farms would really be a stretch. For most of it, it's a hobby for us. I've got 70 trees, and it's my therapy. So I've worked in an R&D lab. It was a part of my life. I like being out. I like watching things grow. But I also know that it's not going to stay that way forever because there's pressure from the city people moving this way. And the west end of the county is the one that seems to be absorbing the most of it right now because it's easier commute for those that have to go to Sacramento, Stockton, or Palo Alto, wherever we have to go. And to try to keep it rural is a noble effort. I like the quiet. I like the wild turkeys wandering through across the front lawn. I think all of that's great. I don't think it's realistic. And I think that we need things like the golf course and a few other things to bring income into the area, bring jobs into the area, create a larger tax base. And I am not a golfer. My last game of golf was in college in 1966. So I'm not really into that. I'm not looking for any free rounds of golf at Trinitas. But I think it is an asset to the neighborhood. I've heard of all the water issues. I've heard about it the first day that we moved here with my neighbor on the east side. He'd been there about 20 years. He was on his third pump. He said, get used to it. You're going to pump sand like crazy. And he's right. First couple of years it was really bad. After that, it kind of tapers off. But I still get sand from time to time. And I just figure it's part of the price of living here. And eventually, I'm going to have to put in a new pump. And it's just, I accept that. I also accept that the people out there with the 80, the 40, and the 20-acre parcels will be breaking them down into 5s. Hopefully, no smaller than that. And I'm going to have lots of neighbors. 12 years ago, there was a few. When I go out in the evening to look around, I see lights all over the place now. I'm out of time.
Just about.
Okay, good enough. That's all I have to say. I urge you to approve the Needy's appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda Hospital. I live at 9664 Hospital Road, right across from Trinidad. I told you before about my water problems. I need to have even more. I've got 2 filters here that I can show you. I was supposed to change the filter in 4 months. Well, I had to have the pump guy come out because the pressure went down. I constantly have to change my pressure. He couldn't get it off with the normal little thing that we had. He had to use a big old wrench. And this is what it looks like. And so then he recommended that we do it again in September. He came by September 26th. He thought he could get it off because he put it on by hand. He couldn't get it off and use a wrench again. And it's a September filter. We had no problem before Trinidad came in. No problem with our water pressure, no problem with our well at all. We went deeper in 2007 for this one, and we're still having problems. Am I supposed to sell my livestock someday? In the future, I'm not going to have water. I have livestock that have to have water. And I have the right, there's a bill that says I have the right to farm without any interference from something else. And this golf course interferes with my production of livestock, my family production. We rely on that for our income. So I definitely advise you to deny this project, this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Thomas Casino. I'm here on behalf of the Calaveras Planning Coalition. In summary, the coalition supports the staff recommendation to deny the meeting's appeal. We encourage the board to uphold the Planning Commission's approval of the Kirk appeal. We encourage the county to grant the CSERC appeal. We encourage the county promptly to carry out its code enforcement responsibilities and its planning department enforcement responsibilities at Trinitas in the very near future. However, if the board grants the Needy's appeal and decides to reconsider a golf course at Trinitas, we strongly encourage the county to comply with CEQA by completing a valid EIR, adopting feasible mitigation measures, making findings of fact, issuing a statement of override considerations, and posting a notice of determination. We also encourage the county to avoid taking actions that would lead the Trinitas opponents to adjudicate the groundwater basin before the State Water Board. We have a number of reasons for taking these positions. First, continuing the golf course use is not consistent with the general plan. We've been through that before. I won't belabor it in any detail. Second, the project has a nexus that falls in the general plan. There's a detailed analysis I submitted yesterday for the record if you're interested. Third, the approval of the golf course requires CEQA compliance, as I just pointed out. Another concern, and I haven't heard this one addressed yet, so I'm going to spend more time on this one, is that the Trinitas golf course may trigger one of those rare instances in which it's actually in the best interest of the Trinitas opposition to adjudicate the groundwater basin with the State Water Board. If there's not enough groundwater to go around, resulting in turbidity and other water quality problems, such as you just heard about. The State Water Board can be asked to adjudicate the groundwater basin, allocating specific amounts of use and limiting amounts of use by each party in accordance with state law. From a county perspective, such adjudication could be a disaster. First, it may mean that your Board of Supervisors would be essentially handing over groundwater use decisions to a handful of Sacramento bureaucrats. Second, powerful out-of-county parties will intervene to protect their substantial interests, placing Calaveras County's interests in jeopardy. Third, the interim and long-term remedies doled out during such an adjudication could hamstring the Board of Supervisors and the communities as they review projects, develop community plans, and prepare general plan updates. Do not send Trinitas opponents into a forum for relief that will have severe and adverse implications for the rest of western Calaveras County. I want to conclude on two personal notes. First, Trinitas is not the first water-sucking development that I have seen that threatens the viability of ranches and working landscapes.
Mr. Castillo, you're getting dangerously close.
And I'll finish with this final item. For 14 years, I've represented interests of ranches in El Dorado County, Amador County, and Mariposa County. When they were threatened with the loss of their water, I stood up for them. If I'm called to do so again in the context of Trinitas, it would be, again, my great honor to serve the ranching community in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, my name is Renee Harrison. I am a resident of Live Oak and also a bordering neighbor of the golf course. I had a beautiful picture just a few seconds ago of some golfers as of Sunday playing on a hole that you can see directly out my kitchen window. And there were 4 golfers there, and there was one gentleman facing towards me and my 3 children, and he was urinating on the golf course. And my oldest son said, "Mom, look at that guy, he's peeing." And I said, "Yes, Trevor, that's inappropriate behavior." Now understand that my oldest son is autistic. He calls it like he sees it. If it's black or white, and there's no gray. And he flat out told me, "Mom, that's not appropriate behavior." And I said, "You're right, Trevor, and it's not something that we need to keep looking at." So what I want to pose before you is, that's not really considered agritourism because he's not there to water the golf course, and he's not there to replenify the aquifer. He was there to play golf and to pee in front of everybody. Now, I have 3 boys. I can't imagine if it was someone with three girls. It's a little less offensive when it's a boy, but, my boys are young. They don't need to see that. What else is going to come next? People having sex on there? You got to wonder, if they're peeing, what else are they going to be doing? So I urge you to deny this appeal, because it's going to affect me, it's going to affect my personal liberties, and I didn't ask for this. I did not ask for this. And my well is dangerously close to failing. I'm not going to have a banker come up here and tell you to bail me out when my well goes dry, and I can't sell my house because I can't produce water and I can't bring it in, and I can't pay for CCWD to bring in a water, supply for me. Who's going to bail me out and all the other residents that live along Live Oak whose wells are failing? Who's going to come and save me or my family? Or who's going to save my family's dream? Who? Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Sayers. I am a resident at 9451 Patel Road. My Mimi is my brother. However, that has nothing to do with this. I'm not here talking. I have heard repeatedly over the years about well problems, water problems, stuff like that. I live adjacent to the property. I purchased our property back in 2004 from John Barrick. There was a well there. We have not had any well problems like people in Live Oak are talking about. I'm a little closer. I also actually dug another well, capped it off because I was going to plant olive trees. We don't have money right now to do the planting, but we plan on doing that with our property. This is a dream for our family. I bought this property out here because we wanted to get in on the olive production business, my husband and I. But right now, as it stands, it's just like, it's a question of the dream. But the water issue, that was my main focus of coming in. The wells, the problem with the livestock across the streets. The issues that have been brought up about the horses spooky. Well, we have horses. They're not spooked by the golf carts. They're not spooked by our Kawasaki mules that drive around. They're not spooked by the tractors. They're used to it. There's neighbors in front of us that live directly on Hospitality. They have horses. They had sheep. They had a plentiful supply of sheep. Especially, they had so many that they had to actually get rid of them. But they haven't been up here to talk about it. I just know because I'm behind that. And when people are like in the neighborhood are talking about how their sheep couldn't produce, well, it's kind of hard to say that when the neighbor in front of me is have like a ample supply of beef and one ranch and all these little pigs running around. The reason they got rid of them was because of the coyotes. That was the problem, not the golf course. And there is no sand in my well. I haven't had well problems. The only problem I had was because our well's so old, the pump was in the ground. We had to have a well person come out and move the pump up. Then our water was fine. But don't you think that there's going to be well problems with persons like living really adjacent to the property would have well problems too? Anyways, that's all I want to say. There's not a water issue here, and it's a family dream, and it should happen. There's nothing wrong with it. But we need to get in on the agricultural things too. We gotta, make the dream happen. But listen to the water things. A lot of people are saying things that aren't, they're just not true. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sayers.
Good afternoon. I'm Pat Bailey from Wallace. We're here another time discussing an illegal golf course, no matter how pretty it is, no matter the, quote, no business rule, unquote, no matter the Nemes are still watering and maintaining the golf course on agricultural land. The Nemes found a way to get around the no golfing mandate. They ran a color ad, Nature Now Open, in the Stockton Record more than once, and it says call for tea time, timed conveniently before the last hearing. When it was ruled that the golf course is not landscaping and not agritourism, they changed the ad to Nature Now Open, but replaced the water view picture with a picture of olive oil products and added the wording, quote, try our signature product grown on our orchard, unquote. Again, conveniently timed before this hearing. Clever merchandising, one might say, but to me it's defiance and mockery of the rules. You can purchase a day pass for fishing, buy a bottle of olive oil, tour an orchard, watch birds, or for that same $100, you can play golf. There seems to be more people skipping the, quote, nature part and playing golf, leaving with a $100 bottle of olive oil. Which brings me back to the water, which has always been an issue with me. In order to maintain this golf course, the Nemes are still watering. And water is becoming a really big issue in this county. Much talk, many meetings, newspaper articles on wells running dry in the county every day. Your ordinance requiring, well, temporary ordinance I guess it is, requiring public water and sewer for subdivisions smaller than 40 acres shows that you know groundwater needs to be conserved for agricultural operations. It seems as though Trinitas has harmed many wells in our area and could potentially harm more by excessive use of watering a golf course. And I have deep concerns for my own Wallace area. So please consider your decision in view of future legal situations such as a state water board adjudication. Protect our water for us in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Don Kuhn. I'm from Burson. The staff report said that there wasn't a state definition of agritourism. However, I found one under the University of California, and none of those apply to golfing on AT land. Golfers come to play golf and not to visit the olive farm orchard. Playing golf in no way participates in the active involvement of the olive orchard's activities such as pruning, grafting, spraying, harvesting, watering, weeding, fertilizing, etc. In no way, shape, or form does the golf course have anything to do with the enjoyment or education of the olive orchard operations or the olive products business. It does not even come close to meeting the definition of agritourism and is a violation of the existing California County AP zoning ordinance. Therefore, it is ludicrous to say that golf is agritourism and their appeal should be denied. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jackie Neal. I want to know where the outrage is. There should be enough outrage in this room with you and with the commissioners who sat here, as I have, and heard them say, don't play golf, don't play golf, don't play golf, don't play golf. And they're still playing golf. They're sorry they're losing their land. I'm sorry they're losing their land. But if they were really sorry, would they have not stopped the first time they were told to play golf and then tried to play by the rules? Or would they just continue to flaunt the rulings of this board and the planning commission and every other meeting? This is what, 5, 6, 7 meetings I've been to where they said don't play golf. And even the two of you that voted in favor of the project should be outraged that your board made a decision and it's being ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
I'll be very brief, and I came up partly just to turn in for the record a disc that includes the entire final EIR. When the project was being considered, the environmental impacts were looked at. The vast majority of those that were considered significant and unavoidable were related to the fact that the golf course had already been built on agricultural preserved land and with the possibility of it continuing to be used in that manner on ag preserved land. You looked at 4 overriding considerations for the whole project and did not find them. And several of you specifically mentioned in terms of the great tax benefits that its proponents talk about, that half a project would not get you there. A little golf course that's ag preserved land is not going to contribute a significant economic benefit to this county. The economic or the environmental damages that have been done and the lack of mitigation measures or conditions that would apply if you simply decide that this is agritourism in total violation of the purpose of the AP zone and the connection of the definitions within it, such as recreation and open space, to the definitions in the Williamson Act, which say that recreation happens on land in its natural or agricultural state, which is why cross-country skiing is fine, and certain other things that are not heavy impacts on the environment. If you let a golf course exists on a 280-acre property that has 12 acres of olives, you're saying it's perfectly okay that there is no proportionality needed between the agricultural use on AP land and whatever goes in terms of providing money to the property owner, who supposedly can then keep that little tiny bit of land in agriculture. That's not what the Williamson Act is all about. That's not what our AP code is all about. And you sat here just a few weeks ago, because I was in the audience, and every one of you expressed a strong support for continuation of this county's participation in the Williamson Act. It has restrictions. Golf courses are not allowed. No, it's not in the Williamson Act anymore, but it's on AP land, and the language in our code says that all the uses in AP land that have been designated are compatible with the Williamson Act. That does not apply in this case. If you go ahead and say that this is agritourism, you might as well rescind the county's support for the Williamson Act.
This may give us allowed you to go a little bit beyond that.
Thank you very much.
Could you, for the record, identify your full name?
Oh, and I did want to.
And could you state your, for the record, your full name? Full name, please?
Kathleen A. Mayhew.
Okay, well, you didn't identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said Kathleen. I guess I was writing it, and I thought I was speaking. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is David Hirsch. I live about 1.5 miles north of the Trinitas project off of Hospital Road. And first, I'd like to address the young lady who spoke about the littering on our roads. And it's there because our local residents continue to litter. But I, representing Trinitas, cleaned from Highway 12 to Highway 26 myself personally, representing Trinitas twice last year, and I'm doing it again this year. People ride by and thank me. They continue to throw up those cans. Okay, back to the real issue. I'm on the Fishing Game Commission of Calaveras County as an alternate official. And being on that commission, I hear about all these junior fishing and hunting programs offered by our commission that are all on the east side of the county. And I asked the commission, since I'm a new official, what do we have to offer on the west side of the county? And the answer was, we don't have the waterways or the areas that allow our juniors or our children to participate in those types of programs. Well, the Nenes have suggested that they'd be very much willing to not just promote golf, which is the fastest growing junior sport in America, just watch the programs, but be willing to offer hunting and fishing programs along with that on adjacent property to Trinitas, as well as ag and livestock programs for the kids in our area that don't have that available to themselves where they live. So I'm for expanding this ag tourism. I've never heard of that term before I met Mike, but if it includes golf, I'm all for it. But Mike's willing to promote with that golf for the juniors in our western half of the community. I think we'd be willing to listen to that and maybe compromise somewhere. And I can't believe we haven't done that yet, and get this thing taken care of and allow Trinitas to remain open.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to address the board?
Bob, my name is Murphy's. But the way I see it, the problem here is with the process itself. I wrote you a letter, it's a little bit general, but you can read it at your leisure. I have attached an article from the Christian Science Monitor for your reading pleasure as well. But it seems to me, now I've been on 2 planning commissions. I've worked for the city of San Jose for 28 years in design and construction, and for civil engineers and so forth. And I think what we really need is to cut through all of the fluff here. You have to find either that, Trinitas is within the law or it's not. And I think probably that's really something for council to determine and to make a decision on his recommendation. On this letter I wrote was more about the upcoming general plan, and the one thing I want to point out is what we need is more clear rules. Work within some clear rules. And all this he said, she said, and Thursday and everything just confuses the issue and gets us nowhere. So I hope to kind of cut through all of it, look at what evidence and what proof you have and make your decision on that. I know it's not easy, but I think that's what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulvaney.
Hi, Susan Larson and Tom Jeffries. Although we're paid to work as consultants in the land use field, we're not here in that capacity. We're here as people who have a fair amount of knowledge about the history of this project. And we've been to many, many hearings on this project and many other matters for that matter. We've never testified. And we didn't intend to testify today because we understood it to be a very narrow question about whether or not golf met the existing definition in the county's own code, the county's laws and rules, and fell within that category as being a not specifically listed but an outdoor recreation activity. So we came here not expecting to testify. But for people, Tom Jeffries here has been involved with this project for about 9 years. I came aboard about 6 years ago. So for us to sit here and listen to believe in this process, to believe in this county, as longtime residents, we get emotional too. We haven't testified, but we sit here and when we hear somebody bring forward a letter dated 2008 and suggest that that is history, that is not history. You have a person of integrity, Mr. Jeffers, who's worked many years, who was hired by the Neves to guide them. He brought me on board to guide. We brought Mr. Bill Abbott, a well-respected CEQA attorney, on board to help guide this process. Not to circumvent any rules, but to follow them. No one's ever discussing goal number 1, I believe it is. I don't remember them quite as well as I should. That says encourage tourism. We brought the project forward, the Neves did, with consultants who said, as directed by the Neves, don't shortcut, don't circumvent, follow the rules, find out what they are. There's a 2003 letter that asks staff, this is what we want to do, guidance. If it can't be done, tell us what needs to be done with the project. So we both feel like that has to be said. And for us to have to sit back when we know that history and to listen to a respected, I presume, officer of the law as well, a person who works in that field, suggest that this is the Neves strategy to hear you in this capacity, to say that we're here and we're going to be emotional because that makes sense for us. That is just appalling to impugn someone's integrity in that fashion. It has been a long, cumbersome process, and we're not here to debate that. We didn't think that was a process. We've always tried to not resort to personal attacks, and we will not do that now. But we really feel compelled to urge you to not try the Neves again, because we would have to say, we're not paid to be here, but we know we sat through many, many meetings where the Neves were saying, just tell us how to do it. When this project first came forward, agritourism didn't exist. It does now. And all we're asking, I think the Neves are asking, is fair consideration under the county's existing code. Thank you.
Do you want to talk also, Tom?
No, I thought she said everything. Even though it's been a long, cumbersome process, rules changed all the way through. We tried to keep up with it. We didn't. wording, keep up with the growth we should or could, I guess. But that's it.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Lou Mabley. I submitted earlier today a letter dated June 27, 2005 from Dennis O'Brien, Director of the California Department of Conservation. He was commenting on the 2005 redraft of the Ag Zoning Code. In that, he cautioned you, in fact, he suggested that go back and start again, because he wanted you to consider the purpose and the intent of the Williamson Act and the limited supply of agricultural land and the incompatible uses that are non-agriculture, ag population unrelated to commercial agriculture operations, or convert agricultural land either directly or indirectly by threatening the conversion of the contracted land or surrounding agricultural lands. And he said the department recommends the project be recirculated in the form of an EIR. Anyway, I think that speaks very clearly. He was concerned about the number of things that was becoming permitted use in AP land, and I think also by extension in AN land. So in the text, the letter is about 3 pages. I think there are also certainly indirect references to agritourism and that sort of thing, which can end up being quite incompatible with the goals of part of the conservation in preserving agricultural land. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have your job today. Anyway, I just to remind the board, I've been here for a long, long time watching different things. I know Wallace project got turned down in 74, and it was turned down because it had no groundwater. It was zoned properly, it was off the main highway, and it was in the general plan, and I believe the planning department encouraged it. It was turned down because of the groundwater. And then also a project going out Valley Springs, the same thing. It was in the proper zone, it was turned down no groundwater. And a friend of mine lost his job because I got laid off because they were hoping to get that job because they're making engineering on it. So it just seems like it should be a double standard here, is that one person goes by all the roads are turned down and another person is warned somehow. I don't understand it. But it seems like I like seeing just the consistency of the board, and it seems like a lot of talking here is like maybe one change the general plan. I think there's another place to do that in here.
Just for the record, that was Mr. Clyde Clapp. Yes. There was a request for your name, and I just supplied your name. Okay.
Hello again.
Oh, Mr. Rusk.
Harold Rusk. I live in 101 North Shore Lane, Wilson, 772-0225. We have an incredible opportunity here today. It's about time to take it. What we have, really, is a question between two doors. One door is like 1930s, and the other door is
Harold, could you speak up?
You bet. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
You were putting me to sleep.
Wake up! Never mind, I'll let her know. There are two doors. There's one to the past, the 1930s. There's one to the future that we can help along, or we can close that door too. We can open a door for the next generation, that is our children, to design their own futures. The NIMBYs represent that age level, that age group. The NIMBYs represent an age level equal to our own children. And when we look around this room, Most of the people in this room were born prior to 1950. That's a scary thought when we're planning on making decisions that are going to affect the next 50 years. The younger people in this room have a right to their own voice, and I think we need to make sure that we give them that voice. As a note to water, I've said before, I test my well accurately using CCWD instruments every April 15th and every September 15th. Since 2001, my water level has dropped 7 feet. Not per year, cumulative, 7 feet. I live just upstream from the golf course. If they were drawing down my well, I would have known it long ago. I've heard people say it's illegal. As a matter of fact, I heard one person say it's illegal in Libya. I couldn't get the fifth one in there. Yet, young Silly has said in the court that there have been no statements that the course has been illegal. When the Navy's bought that olive orchard, there were 4,000 dying olive trees. They brought those 4,000 olive trees back to life and planted 6,000 more. Now they have 10,000 olive trees with the golf course meandering through them. I think that's fantastic. And if it's necessary to have one economic operation in place in order to guarantee the survival of that agricultural operation, it makes sense to do it. It makes no sense to close that door. I urge you, absolutely, please, grant the Indians the right to operate their own property, and do not take that property away from them, and, for that matter, away from all of us who are citizens in this county. We all have a right to a beautiful future, and their generation has a right to design it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rusk. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board?
I think we'll have a few minutes to rebut the other opponents' marking.
I just want to make sure that there are no other public comments. You may proceed.
Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as possible. My name again for the record, Christine Griffith. I did want to just hit on a couple of points to respond to some of the things, particularly that Mr. Connolly had said and some of the other opponents of our appeal. The first thing, and the point I think on which we can all agree, is that the board's job is to apply the definition that's in the code, and I don't disagree with that. And drawing your attention to the specific language, people have made the statement that the enjoyment or the recreational activities have to be connected to activities in the farm and ranch. And I'll read you the exact wording so that we can all be clear. Agricultural tourism refers to the act of visiting a working farm or ranch, or to any agricultural, horticultural, or agricultural operation for the purpose of enjoyment, education, or active involvement in the activities of the farm and the ranch. So the key is that all that follows there, the involvement in the activities, relate only to what comes after the word or. And that's how one reads an English sentence, that's how one interprets a legal standard. So there is no requirement that the recreational activities be connected directly to the activities of the farm or ranch. And as I pointed out before, there are a number of the specific examples of activities that are agritourism in your code that do not have that direct connection. Going back to something I said before, which I think seems to be a theme, is that everybody's saying, yeah, agritourism is great, but not golf. And if you want your code to say, but not golf, then you need to amend it to say, but not golf. Until you do that, you have to apply the definition the way that it is. Some of the opponents have relied on information in the EIR for the earlier project application,
In particular, I'll note that that EIR was never certified by this board. It was not found to be an adequate analysis of the impacts. And Mr. Connolly, who repeatedly referred to that EIR, I believe, submitted on his own hundreds of pages of comments saying that the EIR wasn't adequate. So, the idea that one could criticize the document and then rely on it in this form, I think, is a little bit disingenuous. One of the statements that's been made repeatedly, and this follows on what the previous speaker said, is that the Nevis are engaged in illegal activity. County council stood before the Superior Court and said, nobody has declared this activity to be illegal. That's what the Board of Supervisors is supposed to do, determine whether or not it falls into the code. And the court agreed with county council, postponed the hearing on the issue in front of the court until this hearing was completed today, and there was a decision from the board. And so I think that does need to be made clear that there's a current illegal activity. Some people have said that adopting the alternative A would require environmental review or secret review. That's not the case. You're not making a change to the code by applying the code to an existing situation. That's not a project under CEQA. And to the extent that CEQA review was required, it's been performed. There was a CEQA analysis done when you adopted this definition in the first place. And that analysis stands as a final, not challengeable CEQA review. The groundwater issue comes up a lot, the availability of water. I don't want to belabor that. That's a really complicated point, but I will point out that if all of the land that was dedicated to golf course use was planted in olive trees, it would use more groundwater. I want to reiterate again that the land is not currently under Williamson Act contract, and that the rules that apply to Williamson Act contracts at the state level and the local level do not apply. And I just want to close by urging you to apply the plain meaning of the definition that's already in your code. And again, if you don't want golf courses to be part of an agritourism definition, then all you have to do is change the code to say not golf courses. Any questions for me before I sit down?
Questions?
Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to address the board at this time? I don't think you're allowed to address the board.
I wouldn't allow me to do so. My name is John Young. This is kind of odd. I just felt compelled to kind of say something normally we don't. Following this has been one of the most painful things we've done on the media side. Because you can see the raw nerves on both sides of this is very real, some very heartfelt positions. But just before you guys are breaking for lunch, somebody had mentioned to me something of why this particular project has maybe been the project. It's been kind of the touchstone of things the last couple of years. It was interesting thing, and I think this kind of sums it up, is that, let's say you're in a four-way stop sign, and the sheriff, and it's after a traffic incident or whatever, it's a four-way stop sign, and the sheriff's there, and he waves you on through the intersection. And then maybe 100 yards down the road, a CHP officer pulls you over and writes a ticket for running a stop sign. And I think that one of the things that's the big unspoken thing in this whole issue is the county's history. And from the very inception, I know there's been, and from talking to Mr. Neely, he may have changed his approach from something from the beginning as well, because I know he's a very hard-driving guy, and maybe he would take a 2 and 4 upside in and moving off that course. But also I think that the messages that have been come out to the general public and the business community are that the county gave its implicit, or at least an understood approval from supervisors who were on board and everything else at the time, and that the political and every ground has shifted under the feet during this last couple of years. This is an imperfect world, and I think a lot of people in the community view the Board of Supervisors as, yes, you're legally bound by the legal definitions of development, but also you're representatives of the elected population to do what is in essence fair, to split the baby in the fact that, say, in an imperfect world with imperfect people, with imperfect projects, what is the best solution for those who are willing to invest time, money, capital in this county, and also to balance the things regardless of exactly how it looks between the lines. And I don't envy your jobs this afternoon, and I know and respect each of you. And but also I think that metaphor I thought was a kind of interesting one that I hadn't heard before. Is, you know, where was the county in this? And was it analogous to some people waving somebody through an intersection and then having another branch of a similar organization say, you have to stop here, or actually penalize you for that? I don't know the answers. And I think each of, you know, this has been a divisive that, interestingly enough, is, I even disagree with my wife on the history of this project. And it's interesting, you know, it's, and I know that maybe, and sorry to interject, you know, it's not normally our habit to say so, but following this has been one of the most painful things we've ever done. And I know that you all see the real raw nerves on all sides of this. And, you know, I think, anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. You have before you, I handed out a letter from Dan Hendricks dated October 5th regarding this project. And I'd like to just be brief, because you know I talk too much these past things. For those in the audience, I'm a former planner for the staff. I was the one who wrote the famous now August 2001 letter informing the Medes of a possible zoning violation, construction of a golf course without proper zoning permits. What I want to bring, no one's talked about this yet, is that you're currently under general plan preparation. You're doing a huge $789,000 project dealing with the general plan for this county. In it are several elements: an economic element, an agricultural element, a housing element, along with the other state mandated elements of the general plan. The actions that you take on this project, distant though it may be in terms of conceptual advanced planning document of the general plan, it has a direct bearing on that, because it will be indicating a leaning toward uses which may or may not be compatible with agricultural activity. This county recently adopted the Ag Zoning Amendments, which I participated in. It started in 2003 and 2006 for the zoning ordinances. It took a lot of work, a lot of hashing out, and I was part of that because I was representing a residential area that was concerned about a hunting club. And the issue of golf did come up, but it was during those study sessions, and I was not part of those study sessions that Mr. Selman conducted with the ag community. What I'd like to do is just remind the board of the complications that if you do approve this project or any portion thereof without proper state clearances or federal agencies involved, which have not permitted this project to date, or violate the intent of the Williamson Act. This goes back to 2001 when this land, both parcels were under the Williamson Act, and construction began on portions of the course in 2002 and 2003. That the Williamson Act provisions may be withdrawn or canceled by the state from these actions that you may take. Please be aware of that. I'm concerned for our agricultural community. I don't want to see the Williamson Act put in jeopardy for those members of the community that participate in it because of this one action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendricks. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board? Okay, if not, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this session, and I'm going to declare about a 5-minute recess because I desperately need to.
Enjoy being here. On every morning. Thank you. I tune in to 5-3 every morning. Thank you very much. What's going on, you know? Yeah, we're just gonna keep doing that to you. Oh man.
How long was your
14 years. Yeah, pretty about the same time.
Not broadcasting the Okay, we're fine. All right, just before we broke, I said I was closing the public hearing. I want to give the other talents here an opportunity to rebut. So, Mr. Connolly, do you have any comments that you want to make at this point?
Ken, I'll make mine very quick. First of all, I want to get back to the issue that I started out with, which is, I've never been in a Board of Supervisors meeting before where a banker gets up and indicates that if you make the right decision for the county, you're going to destroy Mr. Neiman. I mean, that kind of theatrics I don't think is appropriate, which is basically what I heard. No banker, no lawyer can stand up in a public meeting and say, there's no purpose for it, it's not addressing the issue before the board. The simple issue before the board today is that you have to decide is whether or not, under your existing ordinance, agritourism allows golf courses. And the answer to that question in your staff report is no, it does not. So, there's no purpose to that testimony other than to put pressure onto you to say, if you do that, we're pulling the trigger on Mr. Neiman. Now, if you do decide that you want to have golf courses on agricultural or AP land under the existing, which you can't under the existing ordinance, that requires an amendment. And it requires an amendment of your zoning ordinances, which requires an EIR because of the obvious impacts that golf courses have on agricultural land. And it cannot be today that there's simply a grandfathering and pretending that the existing ordinances allow golf courses on agricultural land. It does not allow it. And your ordinance, as your staff has pointed out, is drafted in terms of the uses that are allowed under agritourism on agricultural land. There's also been a suggestion that was said by council and arguments that you can look toward your ag ordinance, and your agricultural definition allows some things in your agricultural ordinance that aren't related to agriculture. And that may be true. But those are there after you did an EIR that determined that you would, what the impacts would be, and you wanted to have those done. So the answer is the same. If you decide that golf courses are something you want under agritourism, it's a project. If you decide that you want to change your definition under agricultural zone, what's allowed in an agricultural zone, forgetting the agritourism argument, it's a project under CEQA. You cannot come in and impose mitigation measures on a project on this golf course at this point to try and band-aid it and say, well, I'm concerned about the traffic, I'm concerned about the water, because that's outside the normal process. You're trying to impose mitigation measures on something you've now just determined is an allowed use, a permitted use, not a conditional use under agritourism. And that is not allowed under any known legal proceeding. I'm sure County Council can confirm that. So what our position comes back to this, you shouldn't be held ransom because of decisions that were made in 2001 by a developer of a project who decided that he wanted to proceed to build a golf course.
spite of being advised that it wasn't allowed on that property, he proceeded. This is not the fault of Calaveras County. Okay? It was clear from 2001. This was a business decision, a business risk. It didn't work out. The environmental cases are clear on that. And I cited them again when we first started the EIR on this issue, on the other project. When a developer undertakes to proceed without appropriate permits, he does so at his own financial risk. And this was a financial risk that didn't pay off, it didn't work, but it can't be done at the expense of Calaveras County and the citizens here. This is a policy decision. It's a decision based on what is in the actual ordinance as it exists today. Thank you.
Okay, you have 11 minutes.
Shorter than that. In terms of the appeal that is before us, and with all due respect to the majority of speakers who came up here to speak, majority, some on both sides, they didn't speak to the issue of the appeal. They talked about why they support the meetings, of why the golf course would be good. But the appeal issue, it's like you're being asked to determine whether someone is guilty or innocent, and somebody's talking about something completely off subject. Because the economic benefits of something, or whether or not someone likes the meaning, is not what the appeal is about here today. So I go back to the appeal, and the point that's being points to in particular is, again, the clear language of the county definition from agritourism. Again, with all due respect to the attorney representing the needs, I was an English teacher. I can tell you very clearly, she misstates when she says that when it reads, for the purpose of enjoyment, education, or active involvement of the activities of the farm, ranch, or agricultural operation, that it somehow separates out that enjoyment can be related somehow to the golf course, but education or active involvement is relating directly to the activities of the farm, ranch, or agricultural operation. It says very clearly, the act of visiting an agricultural operation for the purpose of enjoyment, education, or active involvement in the activities of the farm, ranch, or agricultural operation. That is a very important point, because that's the little straw that they're trying to grab onto and try to somehow to come up with, well, we may have been told that it wasn't legal, we're still going to say it was legal. We turned down our application. EIR acknowledged there's many significant impacts that have been mitigated. There's all these plans and requirements that we're supposed to do. But she said, don't think about those things. Deal with what's here today, which is the agritourism. With all due respect, the agritourism, as your own staff report has pointed out, is not the win for them. Instead, I've listed before that it cannot be defined as agritourism for the reasons that your staff has put forward. I won't repeat them again today. The other key piece of information with all of this is the other connected appeals tied to whether or not you can consider it just landscaping. And again, as I pointed out previously, even the meetings in their testimony, both the planning commissioners and for the full board over at the other main hearing chamber, referred to it as the golf course. They didn't say hard landscaping. They referred to it as the golf course. And they've continued to actively use it as a golf course. The last thing that I would come forward with as you consider what your action's going to be is, most of you are trying to find a way to make it work for needs. About 4 years or 3 years ago when we were here, I had made some suggestion about if there's some way that they could have less than a 9-hole golf course or whatever, there's some way that it could work out. Wouldn't it be great that we could still give them something that gives value to the property more than having everything removed, and find a way to make it work? And our center was trying to talk about compromise. But meetings have pushed forward all the way to not just a golf course, but an application to all these other things. And now they've continued for months to continue to do the golfing even after the decision that the golf course was not allowed and was not given approval. So my perspective is you have a challenge, because one of those challenges is if you allow something to go forward with some sort of consideration that it will be limited. For instance, like that it may not be the tremendous amount of activity that was talked about in the EIRs, creating so many tens of thousands of visitors and huge things on the weekends and all the other stuff. If you allow something to go forward in your best interest, trying to please the needs and keep them out of bankruptcy, the reality is that you can't control what happens out there. You can't have a bouncer there to find out, are they using it for personal use? Are they using it for commercial use? Or if it's agritourism and you're going to somehow challenge that there's going to be a court decision with probably consequences for taxpayers here, if you end up moving forward with something that your own staff has laid out the legal arguments for our side, for others are concerned, if you proceed forward with that, you're doing what to me is the biggest issue that was raised at the Board of Supervisors hearings on the project, which is, will Calaveras County be the good old boys who find a way to let something happen? With all due respect, someone shared, well, look inside the box and don't really stick to exactly what's in there, but do what's good. Well, you have laws and regulations, and my hope is that you won't just try and interpret what might be good for the news and good for the people that are supporting you, but you apply the law fairly and consistently based on your staff recommendations, and also recognizing that very clearly you've had a tremendous amount of information provided if the unions have not followed the directions that have been spelled out for them again and again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buckley. Okay, on the procedural side of this, we had the two other issues. Mr. Buckley, have you made all the comments that you... Can you hear me, sir? Yes. Have you made all the comments that you wish to make on that the appeal that you lodged about the landscaping issue?
The only thing that I would say on the landscaping is if Pebble Beach Golf Course is closed at night, it's still Pebble Beach Golf Course. Whether or not it's having golfers on it at that particular moment. If the Trinitas Golf Course has golfing halted for a period of time, it's still a golf course because it has fairways, tees, tee boxes, cart paths, all the other things that make it a golf course. And for the third appeal, I'll finish that one right now to make sure, is that the key point that I put forward related to the third appeal is that this county has the responsibility and the authority to either remove or to somehow deal with the golf course when it is being used for illegal activity. Our senator did not say that you had to have the golf course removed at this point. In fact, in the appeal position letter that I provided to the Planning Commission, our senator said, we defer to the fact that you guys may want to see this proceed through the courts and be resolved before you take some action, but that in the meantime, you have the authority and responsibility to halt an illegal activity. That is what our appeal provided. The Commission agreed with the landscaping, saying this is correct, but the Commission didn't want to say that the county has the authority to stop an illegal activity, which dumbfounds me that the Commission could possibly take that position. So our senator argues that our appeal is clearly correct and valid, that the county does have the authority to actively halt an illegal activity that is taking place on the golf course, in this case, the continued commercial use of golfing. And I would also urge you to vote no on the recommendations that are tied to these appeals today, because there's no way that the county is able to enforce the difference between personal use golf and commercial golf, because you cannot screen all the people that would go in and out. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone wishing to make a comment about what Mr. Buckley has said about regarding the potential removal of the golf course?
Just want to address that point real quickly. Chris Brickman, again, on behalf of the Navies. The issue that's presented to you today, like you said, is dealing specifically with these appeals. even Mr. Buckley just said he's not asking you to order the golf course to be removed at this time. He's saying that to the extent that you find that your ordinance prohibits certain activities on the land that you have the right to enforce. And there's a subtle difference here, because actually what his appeal says is that you have the obligation to enforce. And what he's missing, what he's not telling you about, is something that we all are very familiar with, and I'll use the speeding example from earlier. The law enforcement does not have the obligation to stop every single person that's speeding, right? They have some level of discretion. And similarly, in enforcement of land use matters, the county has a level of discretion that can be applied to whether and how to enforce provisions of their ordinance. And given the circumstances here and the ambiguity, both in the, potential ambiguity in the definition, clearly, since we're all here today arguing about it, but also the pretty clear permission that they were given, at least at some level of county government, to put the course in the first place, I would encourage you to deny that appeal.
More comment again on behalf of KIRC. Did you already take comments on appeal number 2? Because you indicated earlier you were just taking comments on appeal number 1, and then you were going to decide on appeals number 2, 3, or correct?
Correct.
You're going to take your testimony on all 3 and decide all 3?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Then I just have a couple comments on appeal number 2 and appeal number 3 to address the issues that were raised. On appeal number 2, I don't think there's any doubt that golf course is a structure. We agree with your staff reports. Golf course is defined in your code, section 1746.020, describes your uses in physical terms of the land. As a matter of fact, it describes miniature golf courses, and it describes driving ranges. A golf course is a golf course. Whether a golf course is 9 holes, or whether a golf course is 18 holes, a golf course is a golf course. And to the extent that there's a suggestion that by reducing it from 18 holes to 9 holes, it should resolve the problem, you do not. It's still not landscaping. It is a physical structure, as your staff indicates. That doesn't resolve the issue. In appeal number 3, there's a related issue that a golf course is obviously not agritourism, but our position is that in the original way that the resolutions were worded before the Planning Commission, there seemed to be determination that you did not have, or the county did not have, the authority to take whatever action was necessary to either abate the golf course, or bring the golf course into compliance with its codes, to bring the needies in compliance. That is why we appealed that decision. There's an issue that council has brought up as to whether the county has an obligation to bring the property into compliance with its zoning and its ordinances. Clearly, it is our position, KIRC's position, that the county does have that legal obligation to bring it into conformity with its own zoning ordinances. The suggestion by council that the county has the discretion to ignore a violation of its ordinances, to allow a golf course that's not allowed on agricultural property, on agricultural property, is not in conformity with the law, as I might agree. And not only that, such a position is not exactly a legally responsible position. I think all of you would agree that the voters of Calaveras County, the residents here, expect you to enforce the law equally. We had these discussions before. An illegal garage, an illegal structure should be treated no differently than an illegal golf course. There shouldn't be the discretion to ignore the law. But the third point, it is again a subtle point, a slightly different one, is what is the procedure that's going to be followed here to enforce the law? We agree that that authority is delegated to your staff, and that they have to make the determination, enforcement, about how they're going to enforce the decision that you make. We're not indicating that you have to make an order today, so from our position, to direct the staff to take some particular action. But we believe that firmly, appeal number 1, golf course is not agritourism. Appeal number 2, a golf course, 8 holes, 19 holes, is not landscaping. Appeal number 3, you clearly have the authority and the legal obligation to enforce the laws, regulations, and ordinances of Calaveras County, and staff needs to know it has the authority to proceed pursuant to the enforcement letter that was sent out originally and is the subject of all 3 appeals. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other people wishing to comment on this, I will once again close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Okay, we've had a request from Supervisor Callaway to take another 5-minute break. We had a postponed element of the agenda at the joint meeting. We're still going to try to do that this afternoon.
Cool. All right. Look at that. Find that out. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't want to be able to work I know Sam was here before. We both agree. Same question. I said, I bet you You can't do that until you go. Oh,
So next time we'll use sharp gel.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I'm thinking like
Before my computer starts, I start moving, started speaking, and it freezes up. And, I have to just step back and there's a repeater across Okay, just as a reminder, the public hearing is closed. We're taking it back to the board this time, and we will be actually discussing all three issues, one at a time in sequence. We may be asking questions of people that are presented before, but we're not opening up the public hearing again. If the board wants to ask a question, we'll get the response, and that'll be it. And then we will hear, make comments on all three issues, and then make hopefully motions and votes on the three issues in sequence. Good. Understood? Okay. I'm going to open this up for board comments, questions. Supervisor Walensky, are you in the mood to jump into this?
No, not particularly.
Oh, okay.
So my points off the notes. I
it all obviously. A document that was an attachment. However, if you want to continue to not play it, Marita has a bunch of questions, I think, and then Steve has questions.
Yeah, you guys are chicken. I'll start out. Who am I addressing? Where's Mr. White? Mr. White, please. Thank you. If an EIR becomes required, I mean, one of the recommendations of staff was to prepare zoning amendments to A1, A2 zoning districts. I mean, if that's a path we choose to go down, there is an existing EIR on the project. And then becomes, we'll say, conditional use versus a permitted use, and then we'll require an EIR. Some of it seems redundant. Can that original one be used in any way?
Some of the material may be useful. All I can say is that it's not a foregone conclusion that an EIR would be required. I think the comment had to do with reviewing the project, whatever that ends up being. It's a code amendment, for example, to review it under the applicable provisions of CEQA. May not result in an EIR. It depends on the nature of the code machine. As you said, in our recommendation, we were suggesting perhaps considering golf as a conditional use. And if that was the case, then it's possible maybe EIR would be the result of an appropriate environmental document. That's something we have to deal with as we process that zoning method.
I guess I would like the board to take up item C about, at least we need to address that before we take something. If we decide to amend AP A1 zoning districts, where does that leave the golf course?
Well, that probably depends on what we do
with A.
With A, I would say, yes.
Well, I mean, I just sort of, these are kind of generic thoughts and listening to Mr. Buckley's comments. If this goes further, for example, we've been told 2 or 3 times today the water issue being possibly adjudicated by the state water board. Again, what does that do with the project? Every time we seem to go down a path, there's another pothole here. And so we need, it's not as if, my feeling is today's not the end of the story.
Well, I think that's true, regardless of what happens here today. That's correct. Again, it's hard to understand or even give you advice on the consequences until I kind of have a feeling for where the board's going on probably the main topic, which is the first appeal.
And I know I asked you this, we discussed it yesterday, but I guess I need you to remind me. Item B, declining golf course driving range, 9-hole flush, whatever, on zoning amendments. Is that going to be, are we talking specifically a 1AP, or are we talking about just definitions in 1706?
No, I think it's a definitional question. In other words, if we endeavor to define maybe for the first time what a golf course is and what a golf course is not, it would apply wherever golf courses are allowed. And they are allowed in other sections, of another zoning district.
So, but it could be different for each zoning. You could have R1 master plan community and an 18-hole golf course, and you could have a business park which allows golf also with a different definition.
Well, I don't think you come up with one definition of golf course if that turns out what we're talking about. But perhaps there's qualifiers within each zoning district that deals with how golf courses are allowed, whether they're permitted or conditionally permitted or under certain circumstances, certain scale, certain intensity, that sort of thing.
Go ahead.
George, I'm looking at
the alternative listed by staff. And there's an A and a B. Can you explain B to me? Because I've been told several times several different things.
What B says is grant the name appeal and determine golf and golf courses and golf-related facilities to be agritourism subject to a condition under the county code. And again, this is not staff recommendation. This is an alternative that we wrote here as a possibility. I think if you wanted to go in this direction, it would be our preferred way to do this would be to also amend the code at the same time, simultaneously, rather than
simultaneously with.
Well, if you determined that it was appropriate for golf to be a condition of permitted use in year 18 early on, it would mean then that anybody who wanted to construct or develop a golf course would have to get a conditional use permit to do so. Right now, that code language does not exist in the code. And I think it's safer, there have been a lot of discussion today about SQL implications and other things about the decision to make. I think the safest way is to amend the code, to cover the eventuality. And in this case, change the code to make the provision for golf courses, however you want that to be, give us that direction, and then whoever wanted to take advantage of those regulations to do so, either afterwards or simultaneously. That would be our recommendation. That was the recommendation.
So when Maria asked the question about a secret review and being able to use the one that's existing for this project, that covered this project.
Right, I think where that would come into play eventually, and again, it's hard to say what would really happen here, but if golf became a conditionally permitted use and the DEs were in a position to apply for a conditional use permit in the future, I think some of that SQL evaluation, some of the work that was done for that EIR could be used because it is specific to the site.
Supervisor Winston?
I have a simple question, but I think it's a illustrative of a point I wish to make later. How many pages are now in the record on this project, the overall, since the beginning?
Well, I can't say for sure, but I do know that when County Council filed a public record for one of the litigation was ongoing, I think it was around 11,000 pages, if I'm not mistaken. And there may be more than that. Not that.
Yes, we have more coming today.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I have another question. I'm reading under our ad code. Under 17.06.0070.
This is in the A1 district?
Yeah.
Can you give me that site again?
Well, it's Xed out, but it's under the heading of 17.06.0070.
This is the amended version that was in
Yes, the amended version, yes.
Okay, I can find that.
Okay, as of October 3rd, 2005. And then it goes under agricultural operations. That's what's going to be under that heading is my specific section. And it talks about management practices. It says these techniques include but are not limited to brush removal, tree thinning, control burns, reseeding, pond and spring development, application of herbicides, and fencing. The cultivation and tillage of soil, irrigation, pruning, protection against frost, control of bird or animal damage, lawful and proper use of agricultural chemicals, pesticides, and fertilizers. So those are permitted uses, something that you are permitted to do under either 18
a definition you read.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is, if I had trees and I decided that I didn't like trees interfering with something I wanted to do on my property, like it was interfering with me seeding wheat or what have you, then I could basically remove those trees without permit.
Yes.
Pond and spring development, I could actually do a pond and develop springs and ponds. It doesn't limit the size of those ponds.
This certainly doesn't. I mean, there may be other, state and federal regulations, ultimately.
This is this ordinance.
But this
You have
definition,
to check with other.
right,
Yeah.
right, this definition.
But our definition here says, look at permitted use.
Well, again, this is a definition. It's not under the permitted use section. It's just a definition of what an agricultural operation is. So,
Thank you.
Supervisor Talbot, you have any questions? Supervisor Fine?
No, but I'll give you my opinion if you like it. So, I went first last time, so I'm just going to ask you. You're looking to me now, unless you want more discussion.
No, I'm not quite ready to express opinions yet. I have a number of questions here of my own. But I want to defer to my colleagues here. No? All right. We've been reminded repeatedly by learned counsel and learned citizens here that our responsibility here is to look at our existing codes and see if we can find an opportunity to grant this appeal or not grant it. There have been numerous references to that we should stick to the staff report because the staff report is somehow a suggestion that it's completely accurate and valid. I frankly have some problems with the assumptions in the staff report. Are there any members of the Ag Coalition here? Okay, we have one. You don't count. What I'd like to explain to you is that I have long been troubled by this the position. It's kind of like it's become a religious position of sorts that in this county we can only do. It's been referred to as the Stillman rule that you can only do. It's a permissive code that you only do what it says you can do. And I was bothered by that. I have been for a long time. I specifically went to two separate occasions to the members of the Ag Coalition, and I asked them for some clarification of what their role was in formulating the 2005 revision of the Ag ordinance. Because it had always been referred by others, by Mr. Solomon and some of his people that followed him, that by golly, the people in the Ag Coalition definitely took on this issue and they said, no way, no how do we want to have golf be a component of the agritourism component in this ag element. And I just asked them, did you say that? And their response was, let me read this to you. This is an Agriculture Coalition statements regarding uses in agricultural lands. This is a response that was given to me dated August 12, 2009. The Ag Coalition did, in fact, participate in drafting the various ag land use ordinances enacted by the Board of Supervisors a few years ago. The precise wording of the ordinances in some cases represented compromises reached after discussions with the Planning Department and hearings before the Board of Supervisors. Overall, the Ag Coalition favored broad wording of the various ordinance provisions as it was difficult to anticipate what the future will bring in Calvert County. getting back to what Mr. Rusk said a few moments ago. The wording of the ordinance speak for themselves. The wording of the ordinances speak for themselves. I'll repeat that. The omission of specific examples of uses should not be interpreted as evidence of the Ag Coalition's intent. For example, there is no specific mention of wildflower collecting being a permitted or conditional use, although we certainly assume that there is not a problem. Also, there is no specific mention of air bombing practice ranges being permitted or conditional uses. We certainly assume that would present a major problem. The Ag Coalition is ready and willing to work with county staff to address these specific portions of the agricultural zoning code that require additional clarification. Okay, so my dilemma is reading in the staff report where it says fairly conclusively that it was the Ag Coalition's position that golf would not be included as a permitted use in the A1 zone. Okay, another thing that has been particularly problematic as I've been viewing this is the continuous references to things that aren't permitted in AP. As a part of the evidence that we've been given, this very lengthy staff report, there is a transcript of a portion of a planning commission meeting that took place back in October of 2007, where these parcels were intended to be reviewed by in this particular case it was the planning commission sitting as the committee that reviews these non-renewal contracts. And it has long been the practice, and it says emphatically in this document here, that when a parcel goes out of contract, it automatically reverts to A1. It's no longer AP. Now, Mr. White, could you come up and maybe weigh in on that? Because it is, again, I want to express my kind of anxiety about throughout the staff report. It makes references to things that shouldn't be happening on AP zone property. Now, I realize fully that these two parcels that are in question here are currently technically zoned AP. However, back in 2007, I mean, two years ago, almost to the day, I guess it is to the day, it's 6 today, but nonetheless, these parcels, the transcribed testimony here by Robert Sullivan says, oh yeah, that we do see that there is a glitch in the agenda, that we don't have the proper nomenclature in the staff report, so we'll pull these two properties off and we'll put them back on in 2 weeks. Well, it's been far more than 2 weeks since then. I understand a lot of things have happened, but my firm belief is that if these items hadn't been pulled off by someone who is in this room, that they would be zoned A1, and all of the references here to inappropriate uses on AP they wouldn't have the opportunity to have that toehold of thrusting that up into our faces that, oh my goodness, we're doing something wrong. So, answer this question specifically. Are these properties AP by some quirkiness that took place after this hearing?
Well, again, I can't vouch for what happened at that hearing because I wasn't here, obviously.
Okay.
But I can say that properties are zoned AP until they're rezoned to something else. And what is expected when a property falls out of the Land Use Act is that there will be a rezoning process, a legislative action that ultimately ends up here with the board, and those properties go from AP to A1. And that's happened on a regular course. As you say, in this case, you guys may have overtaken that process and it did not occur.
Okay, but the point that I'm trying to make here, and maybe I'm not doing it adequately, is that the interim planning director at that time said it is the responsibility of the county to take these properties from AP and rezone them to A1.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, it's been suggested repeatedly by opponents of this project that somehow that this is the fault of the Nemes, that this parcel is still AP, and by golly, it's AP. They shouldn't be doing this thing, but I don't know. I don't want to belabor this issue overly, but that is very problematic to me. That concludes my comments on that. I want to also touch on the fact that there was criticism about the fact that there was a representative of a financial institution here. I personally have no reluctance to take his testimony. I think it brings into focus the seriousness of this, and for any member of this board or public who might think that there is some sort of a sham or subterfuge going on regarding that particular issue. I appreciated the straightforward and truthful comments made by the banker. Hated to hear it, but I appreciate your comments. Okay, on the economic aspects of this, I also want to bring up, I think Chris called it a tome. I like that word. This is a document that was prepared by our legal staff that reviews what other counties in the state do in regard to how they approach the particular issue of having whether golf is a permitted use in the ag zones. Now, the summary of this document, the way that I summarize it is that out of 55 counties that were questioned, and of course we have 58 counties. We wouldn't have questioned ourselves, of course, but so out of the 55 counties, 41 responded that yes, they would permit what we're being asked to consider here today. There were 10 counties that said no, that they do not allow golfing in an ag zone. Three counties said maybe. So what I'm kind of interpreting from this is that 76% of incidentally there was one county that did not respond. So there were 54 respondents. 72% of those 54 respondents said that yes, that they would allow this to happen. So I'm wondering in my own mind, if I look back at the staff report that says our recommendation is based upon the fact that the Ag Coalition didn't want this, and then I have another document that comes from the Ag Coalition saying we think it's fine. You know, we think that it might be beneficial for this county to look at economic opportunities. Then I am thinking that maybe this county would be well advised to go along with 76% of counties in the state that do allow this type of thing. Less than 20% of them said that they would not allow it, and I'm not sure why that this county should continue to swim against the tide. That concludes my comments at this time.
I guess I'll chime in here. I spent a lot of time on this Janice. Can't hear you. I'm sorry. I spent a lot of time on this. As Janice and Jim both know, I spent a lot of time in their office. I spent a tremendous amount of hours on my own all last week once we got the package over the weekend. Even this morning before I came in early and was on it, trying to take in all of it, understand everything that was going to be spoke about today here, and also all the implications that could happen after we leave here today, depending on what the outcome of this is. I guess part of the problem that I'm searching for is the designation between A1 and AP. There's very, very little between the designations, and they both have agritourism listed in them. And generally, AP in our county is usually under Williamson. And like it's been testified here before, earlier, that it's usually rezoned to A1 afterwards, after it comes out of that contract. But yet, again, after searching this thing, trying to find a way, the designations that are in our codes as far as agritourism appearing equally and mutually in both zones is just something to be reckoned with me. I just struggle with it. The intent of it, the intent of what was written, the intent whether golf was supposed to be in it or not, the reasons why it wasn't, what's the permitted use, what's the conditional use permit for certain things. And this decision today is not primarily on me or Trinitas project. This is an interpretation of what we're allowed in our codes in these two zones. And the way it stands right now, without having staff going back and making some recommendations to us on designations in these two zones, including DOF, it really throws a lot of things up in the air, in my mind. And I really struggled with this on how I could find a way. I've asked thousands of questions, and I appreciate Janice answering what probably were some stupid questions, but I wanted to get it clear in my mind. I probably spent all of my minutes on my plan on the phone to the county council about it. And I'm open to having staff come back with some recommendations to us for an A1 zoning that would include golf in it. I can't really agree with anything that would be in an AP zone simply because state laws say, the DOC says that golf is not an acceptable designation or use for that land under the Williamson Act. But I think if we have some recommendations to us about changing some of the A1 zones, some of the codes in the A1 zone, what's permitted, what's conditional use permitted, and we lost some leeway into saying that golf is permitted for a conditional use permit in an A1 zone. And I would think that I would probably make that motion here today, asking for that to happen. And probably look at a lot of different distinctions that we could put into that between the AP and the A1 code, so they are distinct in their own self. And it's very clear that they are two separate things. I don't know where the rest of the board stands on it, but that's how I feel about that.
So where are you on the appeal?
We're just doing appeal one right now, correct? Well, I asked about option B, and I think I'm in favor of something along the line of what option B has to say here. I truly believe that it should have a conditional use permit applied to any golfing or any commercial use golf course in an A1 or an ag zone. So I might try and amend this when I make a motion, but I think it's all.
No, you can, that's I'm not sure you can expand that appeal. It's coming.
I'm finding the alternative.
Yeah, well, that's to staff to bring something back. That's different than the appeal. You can't correct me if I'm here.
I can't amend the appeal, but a motion that I can make can be based upon this option B. Is that correct, Jim?
So you can direct, option B would direct staff to bring back something to the board to consider.
Correct.
If you want to make summarizing comments on this first issue, Tom?
Okay, I'll give my comments then. Let me start by saying that I don't believe an 18-hole golf course is agritourism. I think that's a stretch considerably too far. Having said that, let me go back to sort of where we started on this. I voted against the initial proposal because I felt it was lacking on infrastructure, meaning that it wasn't on public water, sort of appropriated water, it wasn't on septic, it wasn't on acceptable roads, and it didn't have in my opinion, location that gave it a close proximity to the community center. And I look at where we are now, and those reservations I still possess. If this had come under the agritourism or the commercial golf course, I don't believe I would have supported the agritourism ordinance. I think we do have an obligation of trust and duty to the citizens, in my opinion, to for lack of a better term, protect and promote agricultural activity in the county. We basically agreed to continue funding applications for the Williamson Act, and not heard, or at least I have not heard any opposition to supporting agriculture in that way. But I think we start to violate trust if we just sort of turn agriculture and agricultural zoning into activities that the general public and both myself would view as being fairly considerably divorced from agricultural activity itself. If we were to consider a golf course to be acceptable in the A1 zone, I think it would definitely need to have a conditional use permit. I don't think you can just permit it as a ministerial act, because if you did that, there would be no mitigations, there'd be no road improvements, there'd be no infrastructure improvements, etc. And I don't see how you can open an 18-hole commercial golf course and say we are not even going to consider infrastructure improvement. So I think it would have to be a conditional use permit, and quite frankly, if it were, the things I would be looking at would be the four things I just stated that had to be support the original application. One of the problems we have here is that this is all after the fact. I mean, you could have pulled Calaveras County's planning department and say, we allow golf in A1. And the answer would be, or could be, yes. I mean, if you come in and get a specific plan, which does require a general plan amendment, you could, with the appropriate approvals and consistent with state law, county code, etc., you could put in a golf course in A1. If you put it in under a conditional use permit, then you can put in a golf course, but I guess the question will be what are the conditions? Obviously, a conditional use permit requires an environmental review. A permitted use does not necessarily do so, being a ministerial act. So my inclination is to uphold the Planning Commission's decision on the agritourism appeal, and recommend to vote to grant the appeal. Let me just make two other statements. Number one is we're here, in my opinion, basically for two reasons. Number one is the applicant did not get the proper approvals prior to the project, and there's much in the public record showing, quite frankly, a misrepresentation of intent. And secondly, I want to, I guess, take exception with the bank representative that's here today, because that's the second reason we're here, is the bank didn't do their job and basically made a loan of several millions of dollars without entitlements, having been granted by the county. And I take great exception to the bank having made what I would call a very negligent loan. And we saw that all through the housing crisis that we're now experiencing, where the bank makes the dang loan and then stands up before this board and says, well, we're going to foreclose on our loan bank, and this board takes a particular action. I think that's entirely inappropriate. And if the bank had done their job, I'm not sure we'd be here today either, because the loan would not have been made, but the improvements would not have been done. And due to the gross negligence in the management structure of the bank, at least as concerns this loan, that has also brought us here today. So that concludes my comments on the first appeal.
Supervisor Walensky.
I'd like to begin my remarks by thanking the people who have stayed through this entire hearing and through these even 8 years. Your tenacity amazes, and while it makes our jobs more difficult to have this level of public participation, it certainly expresses a lively democracy in Calaveras County. How we practice it may have a few things to improve, and I'd like to talk about that in a few minutes. But I'm writing a book called You Know You're in Trouble When, and I have a new entry today. You know you're in trouble when you're discussing an ag issue and there are more lawyers and bankers in the room than farmers. So with that, I'd like to take you through my thought process on this. It starts quite a while ago, back in 2002 actually for me, working with Calaveras Grown. The ag community was in pieces. We had small farmers in Calaveras Grown, we had big ranchers in the Cattlemen's Association, we had the wine grape growers and vintners not necessarily working together. We had a lot of pieces of it, and we spent a lot of time arguing whether goats were actually fair-worthy animals or just cattle. Flash forward a little bit, and you see an ag community recognizing that the rate that we're paving the best ag land in the world down in the valley, and the elimination of a good portion of the agricultural production capacity of the United States is actually something that should concern all of us. And it began concerning the ag community enough to actually begin meeting together and thinking about what we would do here in Calaveras to buck the trend, to at least slow the liquidation of ag lands. And that led to a reform effort, a revision of our ag code by people who were learning about code, were putting things together, a volunteer group that worked its butt off to bring forward what now appears to be a slightly flawed, but nevertheless significant progress in my view document. The process was actually quite thorough, vetted quite thoroughly, and at least one part of this included proposals within second or third final draft that included golf. The final one did not, and there's a lot of discussion about how that occurred. But to my way of thinking, whatever iterations will prevail are going to be likely heard in court. And you'll probably get more than one opinion, because the truth of the matter is that the community that was discussing it did not have either strategic or content unanimity. There really were differences in the room. Some thought that putting golf in was a bridge too far and would not stand. Some felt that it was an important piece of what could become an agricultural, an economic boom to agriculture. And that was actually the main purpose of this, was how do we keep ag land and ag production? What are the things that we can do to improve the prospects for hard-pressed farms in Calaveras County? In the end, the decision was made to take the word golf out of the ag zoning code proposal that was passed by the board. Ag still finds itself, not ag, golf still finds itself in the recreation zoning, and that's something I'll get back to later. One thing that really worries me about what we've been through together in all of this discussion is that the dark words of Supervisor Callaway at the time the ag zoning code came before the board, if this gets out of hand, if this becomes a stopping horse for non-ag activities that moves way beyond the original intent, that this will ultimately come to discredit the ag community, and that we will be lined up trying to defend the last remnants of an initiative that is designed to actually help ag. And we will have created a level of numeric opposition to these kinds of reforms that will ultimately be our undoing. Personally, I always hate admitting that another supervisor in opposition to something I was supporting might have had a point, but in this case it appears that we may have gotten very close to that. Something I wanted to talk about also, that I think is when we divide ourselves up this way, some unfortunate things happen. But what I want to put on the record here today is that the work that this staff did, imagine if your job, after having a good portion of the people next to you laid off, is to somehow sort through 11,000 plus pages of input. Thank you all very much. And try to make some order, try to put it together in a way that makes sense. Not just for the project as a whole, but individual appeals such as what's before us today. Each one requires a complete reconfiguration and a different focus. Not that we ourselves have been focused today, because the issue before us, as even the attorneys at least stated, and then probably contradicted, is only the interpretation of our ordinance, our code. But to say that the staff was derelict, or to imply that somehow the people who worked so hard and with due diligence on this effort, or to target people by implication in litigation who were doing their jobs with due diligence, has a chilling effect on the ability to do the work with integrity. And I want to just personally thank the people who, with some degree of courage, put their nose to the grindstone. I don't know how many hours past what we pay you were worked, and there probably are all kinds of Fair Labor Standards Act violations that went with this, but you did, from our first planner who went out and suggested that there was a problem perhaps and that people ought to look at it, all back in 2001 I believe it was said, to the folks who put this report document for this simple hearing and appeal today. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And while I don't agree with everything that's in it, your work does speak for itself, and certainly the effort shines. By the way, I think this is one of the best staff reports we've ever received in terms of its organization and its detail. Now I'll tell you what I really think about some other things. One is that the idea that we're now 2 hours into, 2.5 hours maybe, into a hearing on housing, or that we have not completed our general plan, or that we have at least 11 community plans that I know of that have not been thoroughly reviewed, or that we have 7 or 8 ordinances that are in draft form that have not yet come before this board, and that this kind of work could have been devoted to that, makes me wonder how we managed to spend our last 8-9 years in a world of golf, while these other things went unaddressed or with a lower level of attention and detail. My personal preference would be that this caliber work would be devoted to the things that I believe I was elected to try to work on. Now, as to how we deal with one another and how we get to moments like this, it has a lot to do with strategies and tactics. It has to do with the kind of behaviors that we exhibit when we have disagreements. There's certainly no unanimity in Calaveras County about virtually anything, but how we handle our differences matters a lot. It has something to do with how we go on after disagreements. It has to do with the kind of communities and fabric that we tie one another up with, the ability to get things done in other moments, in other days, in other arenas, on other issues. It has a lot to do with how we process things. So here we are with 2, 3, 4, 10 lawsuits, with a great deal of our time and attention devoted to something that actually, in my district, we're the only district without a golf course. And I'm just not sure a whole lot of my constituents really regret that a whole lot after this experience. But I will tell you that it is not the biggest thing going in District 2. The biggest thing going in District 2, when I go up there, people are talking about how come we're raising garbage fees because we're broke already. Or how come we don't have a house when we're living in a tent out in the forest. How come it's so hard to get anything done just in a simple day-to-day way in this county. And I can tell you that the distraction and the amount of time and energy after having gone down this long and winding and twisted and unfortunate road is something that I hopefully will learn from so that we do not repeat this type of work. But I'll tell you, we have divided even our meatiest family on this. And you have a divided board of supervisors, you have a divided planning commission, you have divided communities, you have a neighborhood torn to shreds. That speaks more of the tactics and strategies that people employed early on in something that should have been mediated 4 years ago. That should have been worked out. Neighbors talking across fences can usually get things done in this county. But instead, we lawyered up fast, we got into disputes, we blamed people, there was vilification of individuals, there was kind of attacks on people on both sides. I could see the pain in people's eyes when they spoke to us, from the neighborhood, from people who would take different positions on the issue, from the people who originally wanted to make a golf course. Regrettably, during the course of it, it wasn't just a golf course. It was a vineyard, it was landscaping, it was many other things. So when you ask, where was the county? People said, okay, where were you? Well, I'll just read one little paragraph. It says, there were statements, and by the way, read the 11,000 pages, because you'll find these statements in writing, in the record. But there were statements that included that the land was being prepared for grazing, landscaping, installation of a vineyard, and then in response to questions about a golf course and code compliance, as a few personal holes of golf. Now, I understand that projects evolve, and that we figure things out where we get resources or we don't have resources and things change. But when people blame the county and its staff for not keeping up with it quite right, we have to look at what was in front of them at each individual time along the way to be able to figure out what they were actually responding to. And then if you mix and match the responses, you can say, well, yeah, you agreed with a personal golf course, 6 holes, and an agritourism center for sale of local produce. Well, that's not necessarily an agreement for the concurrently advertised 18-hole world-class arrangement. So, yeah, the county may have shown different looks at different times in relation to different bits of information and presentations that came before it. We wouldn't get into this level of dust-up with one another if we were all dealing with the same fact base. So, I suggest to everybody in this room and anybody who might be listening that maybe we ought to do some remedial education. Take those 11,000 pages. You want to really know what's going on? And there's a lot of stuff that's been spoken here that actually conflicts with the history that's pretty darn clear in those documents. And I would very strongly suggest that if you have any doubts about whatever this board decides, if you have any doubts about whether there's a basis for a decision that is made, you should read those 11,000 pages, as you have forced us to do ourselves. This has been arduous, but it does lead me to the last point I want to make. When you're interpreting, now I'm not talking about anything, I should say one last thing about the politics of division. It's not just about personal politics, it's about histrionics, exaggeration, and hyperbole. So, for instance, on both sides of this issue, I've been fascinated to listen to the water stuff. My well's going dry. Yeah, well, guess what? There's wells going dry all over Calaveras County. There's wells going dry all over that basin at its top edge because it's going down at 1 foot a year and it's been doing that for 40 years. Here's what we know about it, that it's going down at that rate. Here's what we don't know. What's the effect of a golf course or any other ag activity or other non-ag activity or ag activity in that particular part of the basin? Is it on the edge of something? Which side it is at? Which of these parcels? You could be living right next to it on one side and have no effect. Maybe have a big effect just right adjacent to it because of the nature of the underlying geology. What was told to us and what I believe, and I'm really saying a pox on all of the people who spoke on water, is that we don't know enough. That it would take 5 years of hard study to actually have a clear picture. And that the only thing that we do know is that we would be able to have adequate water if we managed to get surface water down there. And despite the generous offers of participation in helping to bring surface water down there by the applicant, it falls many millions of dollars short of actually being able to get it done. And that's going to take more time than probably we have in relation to this project. So when we exaggerate to make a point, we deepen the conflicts and we abandon fact for speculation, and then we lose a sense of trust. And that's happened in this neighborhood in a way that I can only hope you'll figure out a way to heal, but it's going to take as much effort as you got going into this to get back on a neighborly track. Now, as regards to the issue before us today, there's several things that are important. In the interpretation of an ordinance, there are 3 different levels of review. The first is, what was the intent, if it's clear in the language? Now, even the lawyers today, or at least one of them, has suggested that, well, we don't seem to have full agreement on that. So if the intent is not entirely clear, you look at the legislative history, you look at what happened in the discussions leading up to it, what was the intent of the whole board in approving that language. And then finally, if that intent is not clear, you would move to a last criteria. And I'd like to read you some aspect of that because I think it might defy the laws of physics to accomplish, but I think it's really the matter that's truly before us here. If you can't get the legislative history clear, if you can't get the intent from the language, then you should apply reason, practicality, and common sense to the language. You should avoid an absurd result. You should also consider it in context with other provisions of the code. And it must be harmonized, the decision must be harmonized with other ordinances by considering a particular phrase, clause, or section in the context of the statutory framework as a whole. And so I'm trying to figure out what's reasonable. I've heard a whole lot of people talk about, and quote, from San Diego, the ag commissioners, or the UC extension, I should say, farm advisor, with their definition of agritourism. You've heard the Calaveras version and what's in our code, and you've heard the UC Davis extension. All of this is in the record, and there are subtle differences. But in order to find out what's really going on out there, and I'm very pleased that we received this document, there are over 600, and this is from the UC extensions list, University of California Small Farm Center Agritourism Database. And this has over 600 entries from every single county in California, not one of which, despite all different interpretations of golf, has listed a golfing activity.
There was one.
Maybe one? I missed
Solvang.
Solvang. Excuse me. I missed Solvang. All right. There's only one county in California that has golf as a permitted use, and that's Riverside. And Riverside, actually, I thought actually was a golf. So the question, I've actually been there, and there's a lot of golf. But anyway, looking at what's reasonable, looking at what's going on with all these interpretations, taking a look at where in our zoning code, regardless of what the ambiguous history or the differences of opinion from those in the good, we have golf in the recreation zone. We do not have golf in the ag. In my view, the big challenge here is whether we will have the rule of law, whether we will apply it equally to all, regardless of privilege, rank, or resource, whether we will have some integrity to our codes, however in need of revision some might be. It's important that we at least do not twist our own laws to fit a particular circumstance. Flexibility is one thing, but complete self-contradiction is another. So I will vote to deny this appeal on the first issue.
Supervisor Connolly, do you have any additional comments on this?
Yes, I think Steve was right when he said there was no trust in the neighborhood. There's also no trust in the county as a community on this issue. Mr. Hamilton said this has torn the community apart and that this has been the most difficult and painful issue in the county. And since I've been on the board, I can probably attest that I think that's true. What I've heard today is that the chamber wants flexibility. A constituent called me Sunday night and said because times are tough, he thinks, we should waive the requirements in our zoning code. And I said, but what about when times are good? He said, well, then you follow what the code is. Bob Mulvaney wants clear rules. Les Martin wants to change the definition of ag tourism. Mark Connolly wants us to enforce the law equally. Mr. Buckley said if the county goes forward, there's no way to control it. And Mr. Griffith said, what was the intent? The existing force qualifies as ag tourism, A1, AP should be open-ended. Russ Thomas talked about what the Ag Coalition wrote, that they favor broad wording. Well, broad wording gets us 8 years later to where we are today, and there is no end in sight. The Ag Coalition has stated, it's difficult to anticipate the future. They are correct, and when the future comes and we need to modify things, we will do it at that time. When things are so broad, it is totally open to interpretation, and I'm not sure that applications can be applied when everything is so open to interpretation. I believe someone addressed that earlier today. The ag community, when it came to us in 2005, asked for changes to ag zoning, that if ag tourism be there so they can preserve the ag industry as a viable economic activity in Calaveras County. And they wanted ag tourism in to supplement agriculture and to help the owners stay in agriculture. It was a very controversial issue for me because one of the conditions that they wanted were events. And for those of you that were here then, you will know I had voted against the changes because of that, because of the events, and maybe since moved on. But what is Calaveras County? We say we're a right to farm. We say we're an ag county. What are the cultures and values of the community? I've been to the community planning meetings that we had in different parts of the county, and generally it's we want rural, we want open space, we want agriculture, and we need to be concerned about the intensity of use. Now, there is a schism going on between growth and open space and agriculture. And that's something that we need to work on as we move forward, and the general plan will be part of that process. I'm not averse to where Gary Topanelli might like to go, but at this point I do not consider golf as agritourism as currently defined under whether it's A1 or AP. Now, the issue, so I will be upholding the Planning Commission's decision. I'm not clear, though, on what does that do for the applicant on what's existing now. And I think, John Buckley kind of left the door open to consider options, and maybe there's a way we can come to some resolution on that, but that would be mediating between the parties, and we might be past that point now. So, since Steve took a lot of the time, I voiced my opinion on the issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I can count three here. I would hope that when we speak of compromises, that the five of us can come to some type of compromise on this issue before us. Just open for discussion here, if there was some type of amendment to, I don't want to use the word amendment, if there was a motion up here to have staff prepare something to come back to us that would amend the codes between A1 and AP, defining agritourism, distinctions, what's permitted and conditional permitted between the two, that might include Rocky and one, because if you did reviews, anybody be open to that.
I'll talk about it because I've given it a lot of thought. Yes, I'm open to the discussion. I don't know if we should be doing it piecemeal as zoning changes or wait until we do the general plan. I could argue both sides of that. I think the issue of golf is allowed in many of our zones, the current zone. It's not in this one. I think the code's very clear on it, as I interpret it. So, I mean, I'm open to it, but I think it's going to not be a short-term issue. I think it will be extremely controversial, just listening to the comments that are here today, that we had a planning commission that we had in May when we dealt with the project being possibly rezoned for recreation. So, to look for an easy fix, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I'm not talking about an easy fix, but if you also read the cover sheet that was prepared as Steve spoke about, it says many counties include golf courses as a conditional use in agricultural zones.
I understand that. I'm not every county, I'm California.
Well, I understand that too. But we're all, many of us spoke here today and we talked about a compromise. And I'm open to a compromise. I think going down this open-mindedly, it should be what we as a compromise decision, we can talk about here.
Well,
and I don't hear anybody else chiming in besides the two of us, but it has been discussed about all of us, about everybody, about we wish it could have been compromised. We wish the two parties could have got together. We wish that it would have been in the same room. We wish it would have been mediated. Yet we're the same 3-2 as we were on the issue before, and I don't see any compromise on our part.
Well,
I mean, you want me to compromise and say, okay, I'm willing to concede, and I have. I've said I don't think it should be a permitted use in AP, and I'll stick by that. I don't believe that's the way it should be. However, I'm open to the fact that it should be in a conditional use in an A1 zone.
I guess I have a question about procedure here. Before us is an appeal which we either uphold or deny. There's not I don't see this as something that is possible to do. We're not asking county council whether that we can proceed with various initiatives in this concept.
Well, to refer to Mr. White on the planning aspect, this whole issue is swirling with litigation and potential litigation. And if you want discussion of that on that, I would strongly suggest the government process. But I think the question is whether there's a mechanical way that it's working.
Yeah, I think what Gary's talking about is pursuant more to our recommendations B and C. I think it was our understanding that we would deal with A first, and then we go on to B and C. Because I think regardless of the outcome, the code still is crying out for amendments to have better definitions, better clarity, deal with ambiguity related to agriculture, obviously. But again, I think that's secondary to the main issue, which is the appeal before you.
Then basically what you're saying is that we go with B, to say grant the DE's appeal, and then have them come back to us with recommendations.
Well, as I said before, our recommendation would be to essentially have you initiate that code amendment that would potentially make all of the conditions in A1. That would be able to save a brief. And just saying so. And again, just back to some like the litigation stuff.
Would that satisfy the appeal?
Well, again, all it would, in a sense, do is defer the decision to that point where additional use is possible. And I'm not sure that that works for the deans or anyone else. That's a decision we'll have to make. It's not our recommendation, obviously. Our recommendation is denying our recommendation.
Supervisor, when you're talking about the option B, are you talking about option B? Alternative. Okay. Option B is listed on page 13.
On page 13. Subject to a conditional use permit under California.
I'm just gonna make a motion because we need to do a recommendation before it. But the applicant in 2006 wrote a letter that said it would be a violation if I would allow it to be used for golf course play for private or public tournaments of play. I have not, nor will I, until such time as the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors take action on this proposal. So the applicant has said there will be no golf there until there is some kind of action and, in essence, wanting the course. I move that the Board of Supervisors deny in their entirety all appeals to the Planning Commission of August 20.
All three?
Well, one is a denied, one is granted, and the third is denied. The one to Planning Commission's decision.
On the front page, that's A.
Correct.
That's A on the front page. In other words, Marina's motion upholds the Planning Commission decision.
Correct.
And all appeals of the Planning Commission decisions are denied. That's your motion.
Yeah, and then we can go down back to what Gary wants to go, but we have to deal with what is before us and what is before us.
We're running that by here. So you're upholding the Planning Commission their decision on the three appeals.
Correct. Doesn't mean we can't go.
Which was denied is before us now.
If they deny all three appeals, because all three of the Planning Commission decisions.
And then the council, can we go down that path now?
I'm sorry?
Can we go down the path after this? As far as recommending the staff to come back to us?
Yeah, coming back.
Well, if you're talking about changing the zoning code, of course you could do that. The discussion I think we need to have reserved for later is how that would affect this particular project.
That's going to, if you change the A1 zone to make the conditional use permit for the golf course, that has to be standalone. You can't take that decision and tie it to a compromise for Trinitas. I mean, that has to stand on its own independent merits, absent anything to do with Trinitas.
Did you read these?
I'm looking at the front page, you're looking at the different.
I believe, George, maybe you can help us with this, but as I understand option B, it would be for us to direct staff to bring back to us at another date. That's not something that we can act on today.
Right. Essentially requires legislative action with code change, so.
Right.
That would be my recommendation. Again, I defer to the legal view on that, but I think that's the safest for.
There still is some confusion here. Supervisor Papanelli is continuing to refer to option B on page 13. And I think that at least two supervisors at that end are looking at option B on page 1.
The difference is between our recommendation, the staff recommendation, and the alternatives that we have listed at the end, which is a number of things that we were not recommending.
Page 13.
So it would be the alternative to denying.
You can't grant it and determine that golf and golf courses and golfing related facilities
to the agritourism subject to a conditional use permit. We're not talking We can't do that right now. Tom, we're not talking about property-related facilities. I'm just saying what he says. I mean, we can't insert a conditional use permit requirement at this time. I mean, that has to come back.
I would, based on what I'm reading, I think that you're not citing a correct statement. This staff report gives a recommendation, and it also says that we have alternatives, one of which is B. It says that we could grant the mini appeal and determine golf courses, golf-related facilities to be agritourism, subject to a conditional use permit.
But we have no conditional use permit in the code.
But I think the intent of that scenario was that legislative change would actually take place through the proper process. And again, it's not articulated in that way because we weren't recommending that particular alternative.
In this case, don't we have a procedural issue? We have a motion.
Yes, I'll second the motion.
And then the question is whether that stands under the alternative. If that does not, then we would move to consideration of an alternative.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the question. I just want to make a couple of editorial comments here. We've had statements here on the board that we can't find the window of opportunity that we've heard people talk about within our existing ag zone. There's been a suggestion that in family holdings of 470 acres, devoting 80 acres of that total amount of land. There's been some suggestion that the golfing is the far and away the principal activity there. But as I look at this and look at the investment that's been made there, this is like a poster child for what the ag ordinance is asking our ag community to do. Is to when the economic potential for that 470 acres as grazing land or as olives only doesn't afford an opportunity to make a living on that land, then we are giving an opportunity to supplement or augment the income stream. So I'm a little baffled about why we can't get there. But, anyway, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All in opposition to the motion say no. No. Okay, the motion passes on a 3-2 margin that we are denying the Mooney's appeal and upholding the actions of the planning commission. Okay, now I think there was a second part of that, a wish or an expression of a desire to maybe modify or to at least initiate a modification of our zoning ordinance as it applies to A1 and or AP.
I think we have I don't think it should be an AP. I think we should have a discussion of A1. Yes. AP shouldn't exist in this room, but it should be okay. And make sure that should go out. Yes. And then we should have a discussion. And I'm looking at page 1 here, and it basically says staff recommends the board of supervisors direct staff prepare a recommendation for a zoning amendment, and I would say the A1 zoning district designating golf courses and other unspecified agritourism uses as conditional uses in the A1 zoning district. I don't mind looking at that, but looking at it is a long way from it. I think we've had a very robust discussion of what those conditions should look like. I guess the one thing I'm a little concerned about here is do we want agritourism right now, it's in the A1 district.
It's in both.
It's in both. I think we should take everything out of AP, except the Williamson Act, and agritourism and everything should go as A1. So when you come out of the Williamson Act, you should automatically go to A1, and that's what the code calls for. So there shouldn't be other uses that are taking place in AP, in my opinion. So I think all of that needs to go as A1. And so when looking at that, and maybe like on agritourism, if it's under some scope or scale or size, I look at agritourism as being sort of small scale that sort of blends in with the agriculture.
So in a sense, the direction would be that he would be listed to only those uses consistent with the utility that contract.
Yeah, I think he should be limited to the Williamson Act contract.
I would agree with that, but I also think that the process of deliberation here needs to begin with a consult between the department and the Ag Coalition and begin to look at what we've learned from this and see whether we can repair not just one piece of it. I'd hate to see us talk about golf and then, have the next discussion be a nuclear power plant.
Well, if you notice in the recommendation I made, it's also with these other unspecified uses, which I think are more troubling.
And I think identifying those unspecified uses and looking at what other counties have done about this, there are some very successful ag zoning ordinances that involve and define agritourism to a greater extent than we were able to. And I think now that we have, again, tomes of information on that alone, it would be good to have a discussion with the ag community, come up with some options, bring them back to the board.
I mean, we obviously don't have anything predetermined here. It's just a matter of getting some direction and then starting to work with the appropriate part of the draft.
And you could even divide it into sort of three levels of intensity. One being an outright permitted use, that is, riding, hiking, hunting clubs, fishing clubs, those sort of things that are pretty straightforward. You could have one that's a little more intense, and that being an administrative use permit, and then have something like an 18-hole golf course or bigger things be a conditional.
Right, that construction already exists.
And an administrative use permit is appealable to the board also. So if there's controversy, we can go to the board. That's why I kind of figure out, what levels we're dealing with. But an 18-hole golf course is pretty significant. It's going to bring in a lot of people. I don't know how many 18-hole golf courses there are that have nothing but the golf course and a public restaurant. Usually it comes in and they want a clubhouse, and they want a restaurant, and they want the 19th-hole bar, and they want to have some weddings, and they want to do the normal things that would be complementary to such an investment, so that they get a positive return. So a lot of times they thought if you're just golf course. Well, it's more than a golf course as far as greens, and you need to. And in there you said you need to define kind of what
a golf course is and what isn't.
Yeah, and what is included.
Okay, Mr. White, I have a question for you. Looking specifically at that sentence that Supervisor Bryan just read about the staff recommends the Board of Supervisors direct staff to prepare these recommendations to the A1 zone. If we, maybe this is too logical, but we've got this option ahead of us, or in front of us today. Can we not make that motion to give you that direction? And if so, how long would you predict that would take to bring it back?
Well, again, I wouldn't hazard, a guess at this point in time. Given that this is going to be an iterative process, it's not going to be simple probably, and it does require, I think, a public process with some intense public participation. I think I know where you were headed, which is, once that conditional use provision is there, then you can take advantage of that provision. I just, at this point in time, I'm not prepared to give you a schedule for that happening.
Well, why not?
Because of many of the things that Supervisor Walensky talked about already. There are many things on the table. Again, if this is going to take the highest priority, that's something I probably should know right now. It's going to be in the mix of all the other things that have competing priorities, then again I could certainly come back to you with some sort of schedule, but I couldn't necessarily sort it out right now.
Okay, I understand. All right, well, we talked about this to a small degree. Supervisor Tryon, do you have any inclination to make that in the form of a motion?
Well, I don't know that we need a motion just to give directions, but
I think the direction is to share the
I want to just stick up for George here a little bit. I mean, the general plan is pretty darn important, in my opinion, to get that done. You know, and you got 3 or 4 other things over there you're looking at, and you have a normal workload.
I would say you probably have an abnormal workload, actually.
Yes. Okay. and quite frankly, if this discussion comes back based on Pentecost rather than just the merits of what we want to do, and we're looking at the litigation and huge controversy and the like, it's like right in the back.
And that's not my intent, obviously. This is about appropriate use of that.
Has to be in some environment that we can, have some consensus at. And like I said, the reason I voted against the Pentecost project to begin with was I had no reason now, and quite frankly, if this comes back, I don't want to just have it be in the Dogtown Road, some illegal road, or some road that's just a meter up road. I mean, in fact, there's going to have to be some sort of constraints.
Okay.
Okay, well, you
If you want them, and then order, just say, put it on your file.
I think this is fine in terms of direction.
I think George has his direction, and the second board members will be talking to you.
Okay, we've got a request for a short break before we go on to item number 23. We will be having one closed session regarding Service Employees International, that it'll be conducted after the study session.